whether or not we personally engage with the internet as a medium of collective intelligence, whether or not we see ourselves as global citizens participating in this self-organizing brain, the momentum and the impact of this transition is affecting all of us. We don't have dolphins on the internet yet, but in the meantime, they're still being affected by decisions being made by humans collaborating online. And in that sense, this webbing together of human experience is a predominant force on the planet at this time. And in fact, we're now regarding human beings as a major geological force. There's an international convention of stratigraphers, people who study sediments. And in order to declare something an age, you have to be able to show some evidence of this transition in the sediments all over the world. Our CO2 frozen into the ice cores, the concrete that we have extracted and crushed and relocated, the radioactive isotopes. And it actually seems very likely that the human age officially started sometime in the 1940s when we started experimenting with nuclear technologies. That's the layer that we see all over the world. Acknowledging that we have this kind of impact is a vastly humbling idea. It frames everything that we're doing as a geological activity, as something that the planet is doing. It puts all of our cities and our shipping lanes and our fishing, all of human culture and human activity within the conceptual boundary that delineates nature. We are a natural thing. Now, we may be a natural thing out of balance, but life is dynamic. Life is always out of balance. And so we move from a question of the dualism of nature versus technology, the made versus the born, to a more sensitive and complex question. How is it that we, as something the cosmos is doing, as something that the earth is doing, can invest our mindfulness, our attention, and our collective intelligence into a healthy global system? And eventually, ultimately, beyond the planet. But we have to pass this test of being able to tragically manage the entire world, and not in some sort of self-aggrandizing way, but simply because we were the ones that woke up to recognize that we were burning the house down. The collective accretion of human knowledge is coming together in a way that resembles in many ways the emergence of multicellular organisms from single-cell organisms. This appears to be something that happens over and over and over again in evolution, precisely because evolution itself is a way for energy and information to distribute through a system most effectively. The story that we tell, the dominant myth of our cosmos right now, is the Big Bang Theory, that this whole thing is an explosion and that we're at the beginning of this thing that's going to run itself out. Whether or not that's true, the way that energy trickles down, the way that things seek rest, the way that order seeks disorder is actually driving order and complexity and intelligence. We have these two apparently competing worldviews, one in which things are ramping up into higher and higher levels of sentience, and one in which everything is an explosion that we're just watching fade until the end of time. But to take either of those perspectives to the exclusion of the other ignores half of the story. And it really does seem as though both are the case, that it is the innate laziness of the universe that generates order. We talk about evolution as a process of natural selection. And I think all of us as social humans understand there are many cases in which the circumstances favor collaboration. It's a function of the complexity of the environment. A multicellular organism can specialize its individual units and respond with a greater creative range to a series of challenges than a simpler organism. I want to pause for just a moment in an aside and apologize to you guys, because I don't really know a straightforward way of talking about these things. I don't know that there is a straightforward way of talking about these things, because what I'm pointing to is beyond not only linear cognition in the sense of the way that we've learned to tell stories about cause and effect and one thing occurring before another and arrow of time and all of these things. And it's beyond nonlinear cognition. It's beyond being able to hold things together in a group and understand them as webbed together or interrelated. There's a powerful distinction between interrelatedness as the connection between a series of discrete parts that are acting in a single system and true prior unity, not prior in time, but prior in the hierarchy of manifestation, in ontological order. We parse the universe and identify individual categories and specific objects, including ourselves, and yet we don't do so from a perspective beyond the universe. We do so from within the universe. Like Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. He said, well, all my experience could be a lie, but I'm experiencing something, therefore I exist. But he's still assuming that there's someone there observing it that's separate from that experience. Thought emerges from and resides within our bodies. The self is a linguistic construct, something that certain parts of the brain appear to do in order to orient the body-mind in an environment in which selection forces are at work to favor the cooperation of selves. It's what is required of us in order to relate to one another in society, because the complexity of society is necessary in order to channel information and energy through the entire ecosphere. There's kind of two things that I'm getting at here. One is the relative story of the telos, or the directionality, the urge of evolution. We deserve to replace the story that we have inherited with a story in which we are actually cathedral building. We have something greater than ourselves to which we can devote our lives. Because the increase in the rate at which we're able to communicate our experiences to one another, we're able to start to glimpse the contours of this greater mind that is waking up through us. And that's part of it. But this story is living us. We're not choosing this story, per se. We're not operating on the world in order to produce this thing. We are already of a piece with it. And to whatever extent we can claim that it is waking up, it is only because that whole process of waking up is occurring at every level simultaneously. The simple binary categories of self and other, nature and technology, are no longer sufficient.